Okay. Well, I want to start off by, bringing us into this space, recognizing that we might be coming from different places, we might be in different situations. Some of us might be on the move, others of us are settled. But I want to recognize that here where I am gratefully working and organizing on the traditional, unceded, ancestral lands of the Coast Salish, in particular the lands of the Musqueams, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Um, and I want to recognize that any of the work that I'm doing or anything that I am lucky enough to be doing on these lands, that I always am looking to find better and ongoing ways to act in good relations, right? For us to be in good relations with the land, with the people of this land, and to in the ongoing um, struggles that we're in for land back and for reconciliation. That I hope that I am contributing what I can and growing as a person. So I want to welcome people again. If you haven't already, if you want to add your name into the chat, where you are, what lands you're on, and if you'd like your favorite thing about fall. So today our session is community care and repair. And this session is a collaboration between the Necessary Trouble Collective and Building Belonging. It is a bi-weekly community of practice. So that means every other week there's going to be a session with a different topic, with the idea that hopefully people get to know each other and learn from each other as well. There's a new platform being used here called Sutra. So we hope that people will take the time to use it to share their experiences, ask questions, and start building connections with other community members. So to this end, we would invite you to fill out your profile on Sutra with any information you are willing to share. And these sessions are offered based on the gift economy. So we're going to have more details about that at the end. But the gift economy is a way for everybody to contribute to the sustainability of this kind of programming. If you haven't seen the link for Sutra already, I will pop it into the chat so that people can take a look and explore it maybe at a later time. So in this session, we will have two breakout sessions. We're going to have one at the beginning for connection, so ways for people to get to know each other, and then one a little bit later to practice some of the topics. I apologize if everybody can hear the truck backing out outside my window. There are going to be we have some requests when we are in breakout rooms. One is that in order for us to take care of each other, that we check for consent before taking the lead. So if you're in a breakout room, just check with everybody if you want to take the lead, but asking, make sure you have consent. And be mindful of sharing time so that everybody in the breakout room has a chance to speak. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded both to Sutra and to the Necessary Trouble Collective YouTube channel. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. I'm going to be acting as the tech person, so if you have any tech issues, please feel free to just message me directly in the chat. I'll be monitoring them as Catherine goes through the rest of the session. I also want to introduce a care practice. So we don't have any breaks during this session, so please take care of yourself. If you need to pause, go to the washroom, get some water, a snack, whatever it is, take care of yourself. And if you need any particular support in the session, please send me a message directly. If there is something that is causing you concern or might be causing harm, please do reach out, and if we can, we'll try and address it in the session. If not, we may reach out to you, or we can reach out to you after the session to follow up. Please take care of yourself, and we want to acknowledge that in community, conflict is inevitable. If something emerges, we will do our best to attend to any impact. We want to invite vulnerability, please, but as well as please be aware of possible impacts that anything you share might have on others. Okay. Catherine, did you want to introduce yourself, or we jump in?
Thanks, Carly, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, I'm Catherine Strickland. I am a white settler living here on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and I'm your facilitator today. very excited to be with you all, and yeah, just eager to start this series, hoping that our new Sutra platform will actually allow us to create interconnections between the sessions and carry on the conversations as we go along. So it's wonderful to see all of you. Almost all of you are familiar and recognize, and very happy to have you with us today. Yeah, so we'll just go into our first breakout. This will be 5 minutes, just a chance, rooms of 3 each. This is an opportunity for you to get to know the others in the community, to share, just how you're coming into this session, maybe what is drawing you to this work. So we'll send you into those now, and we'll look forward to seeing you in about 5 minutes. Anything else, Carly, before I do that?
Yes, I have breakout rooms set up. So when I open them, you'll be invited to join a breakout room. So about 90 seconds for each person. We've got 3 people, should be 3 people in each room.
Welcome back, everyone. So I'm Catherine Strickland, as I said earlier, and I'm your facilitator for today. And today we're talking about using empathy to de-escalate conflict. So hopefully you all got a copy of the slides, but I'll be sharing my screen with you. Okay. So I wanted to start off with just sort of a definition of empathy. There's multiple ways that people think about it, but these were the ways that felt most resonant with the work that we're trying to do here. And it's really about, sometimes people say it's walking in somebody else's shoes, but when we're talking across difference and we have particularly different experiences, sets of experiences, backgrounds, identities, it can be really hard to actually be able to do that. So it calls on us to be a little bit more creative and listening in a way that allows us to sort of take the other person's perspective or experience without necessarily ever having had that experience before ourselves. So it's, in Brene Brown's words, it's an emotional skill. It's not really an intellectual skill. And it's allowing us to understand somebody else's experience. And I think an important part of that is also reflecting that experience or that understanding back and checking in to see if we've got it right. To me, that's a really key piece of empathy, is to not assume that we understand somebody's experience from what they're sharing and then melding it with our own. It's to really be curious and to come into that with that sense of curiosity. And most of us learn this skill of being able to listen to respond. It's something that's taught in our schools and emphasized, or at least when I was in school, which was a long time ago. And empathy requires us to really build our skill of listening to understand. And again, bringing that sense of curiosity. And I also want to share how we work with expressing empathy. As I mentioned in the previous slide, in my opinion, it's really important for us to be able to reflect back to the person who's sharing with us what we're imagining their experience is, and coming from that place of curiosity. And in nonviolent communication, which is the modality that I'm most familiar with, we do that by reflecting back the feelings and needs that we're hearing being expressed by the person. So we're not trying to reflect back necessarily the content and the details of what they're sharing. We're trying to reflect back either the stated or the implied feelings that that person is experiencing and what we call the needs that they're trying to express. And we use, as a kind of a learning tool, we use this phrase, are you feeling bewildered because you want clarity, as an example. And the reason the word feeling is in brackets here is because you can also just say, are you bewildered? You don't have to, depending on how it feels more natural for you to convey. And also, again, in NVC, nonviolent communication, we use the term need because you need or needing, but you can also substitute the word want, something you value, something you treasure. Those can be substitutes. And in my experience, this is actually a really unique way of interacting in our society. I mean, we seem to be evolving in the right direction, but it's still somewhat rare. And we benefit from increasing our capacity to offer empathy to others and to ourselves. It increases our own sense of emotional well-being, and it also increases the level of trust and connection that we can build and create in our relationships with others. So before we go any further, I'm curious if anyone has any questions or comments on this piece. Anything you want to add to this that's meaningful for you? Feel free to raise your electronic hand, or we're a small enough group, you could just unmute and speak. Okay. Oh,
I
yeah,
think I do. I
Brendan.
think it's interesting that it's the mention of emotional skill set, because I think when listening, people often are telling a story of what they experienced, and there are all those intellectual details, and like obviously, like I think about myself, I often have lots of details, and I don't just want my feelings expressed, I want my details processed too. But that's just an interesting, obviously the feelings and the emotional skill set is crucial to the process. But yeah,
Yeah,
totally
and
interesting.
you're bringing an important piece into this, Brandon, because part of what we check for when we are in trying to empathize with somebody, trying to understand their experience, is to check also, is there more that you want reflected back? Is there, am I capturing what matters to you in this, or is there more that you really need me to reflect into so that you know that I get it? So that's a really important piece. A bit of a nuance here, but I really appreciated you bringing that in. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? And if you have questions along the way, please feel free to just put your hand up or unmute yourself. So we're going to take about 5 minutes now and just give you the opportunity to journal a recent conflict, or maybe a conflict that just seems to keep popping up. Just something in your life that isn't too intense. And the invitation is to describe that in sort of 3 or 4 sentences. And in this, it's valuable to try to be as objective as possible when we're describing conflict, because one of the ways that we can get into curiosity is by trying to strip out our interpretations or our judgments of what's happening and just get curious about what's actually happening. What did they actually say? What are they actually doing? And the purpose of this exercise is really just so that you've got something fresh, something relevant to you, something meaningful to you that you can use as we go through the material, and you can, therefore look at the material that we're offering and, you know, think, oh, does this apply? How would I apply this? It's something to kind of anchor how you're receiving this information. And then later on, there's an opportunity if you choose to use that conflict in a breakout group. So we'll give you another sort of like just 5 minutes to journal. And then we'll come back and carry on. Harley, I can't pause the recording because of being in screen share. Is that something you can do for the next? Does anybody need more time? So either unmute yourself or raise your electronic hand. Okay. So how exactly does empathy de-escalate conflict? And I'm going to invite you to share in the chat any suggestions that or ideas that you have about this. And one of the points that I wanted to make earlier that I forgot was empathy is it's an emotional skill, but it's also like an energetic. It's an energy. It's a way of. There's sort of an energetic quality to it. You know, when we get into conflict, we often sort of like either brace and sort of get ready for the fight, or we sort of collapse and back away from the fight and sort of like get overwhelmed by the conflict and back away from it. And empathy is neither of those. It's again going into this place of curiosity and kind of like softening, but moving slightly towards, but not in like a I'm ready for a fight kind of way, but in a moving towards from that place of curiosity and softness. And that's kind of, I'm hoping that what we do today might give you a little bit of a sense of that. But, you know, as many of you know, when we're in conflict, our nervous system gets activated, and we can often struggle to reground and sort of regulate our emotions when we're in conflict. And the process of getting curious and moving into a empathic space, empathic energy, actually calms our nervous systems down. And often when we are in conflict, one of the kind of key things that the stories we're telling ourselves are that, you know, this person isn't hearing me, or they're not understanding me. And that experience of not feeling heard or understood, it can escalate the conflict. And as I mentioned, empathy, regardless of whether we're empathizing with the other person that we're in conflict with, or even ourselves in that moment, like, what am I feeling? What do I need? That process can really ground us. And it offers that experience of being heard and understood. As I mentioned, you know, we're really in empathy, we're really trying to reflect back the experience of the other person. And when they get that sense that we're reflecting that back, they get that sense of being heard and understood. And we can build connection even if we aren't in agreement with the other person, we can build it through offering them empathy. Does anybody have any other thoughts about how empathy might de-escalate conflict? Anything that comes up for you? Again, feel free to put it in the chat, raise your hand, or unmute yourself, whatever works best for you.
I had a thought.
Yeah,
This is
Renee.
Renee. Yeah, it occurs to me that um, you know, part of the issue is that we have a hard time seeing ourselves, and we actually need someone external to tell us, you know, reflecting back what we are having trouble seeing, you know. So I just think that's just so beautiful to like really need other people in order to see oneself. I mean, it's tragic, but it's also beautiful.
Yeah, I really love how you bring that kind of like relationality into it. And I certainly don't always even necessarily recognize how I'm feeling or what I'm needing. I just know I'm in like, "Ugh." And yeah, to have somebody who's listening to me and genuinely curious, be able to pick out pieces and reflect them to me, it's like, ah, yeah, there's that real sense of being seen. So thanks for bringing that in, Renee. Anyone else want to add to that?
Hello. Yes, I would
Hi,
like to add
Colin.
to this. This is
Great.
Colin, and I'm calling in by phone. Catherine, I just really appreciated what you were saying about the energetic position that you have and where you're not sort of bracing or, getting ready for a fight or collapsing under the impact, but it's this other way of being. And I think to be curious and to kind of soften around it, I think is really, really difficult too. And so, but I think it's a really nice articulation of what matters in that moment to keep in mind. And so, yeah, it's hard to remember those things when you're in the heat of the moment. So
Yes.
thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you also bringing in that it's not always easy. And again, this isn't a, you have to do it this way. I really hope that people aren't hearing that. It's just, this is a skill that we can practice. And actually one of the best ways that I've learned to practice it is actually on myself. When I notice myself and getting triggered or frustrated, even if I can't do it in the moment, if I can go back to the scenario later and then go through this process of being curious myself and naming my feelings and my needs, that practice actually helps build my capacity so that when I am in a situation with another person, it's easier for me to have access to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And that curiosity, both about the other person, where they're at, what their feelings and needs are, or for oneself too, right? For
Right.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Both seem to matter. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Any further comments before we move on? Or thoughts on this edition? Okay. So, Colin, you kind of segued us really nicely into this, what gets in the way of us offering empathy to someone that we're in conflict with. So I'm going to invite you now to, if you have an idea about this, feel free to put it in the chat. Your thoughts on, what can get in our way. Yeah, definitely triggers of our own, especially if what somebody's conveying feeds into our own story. The urge to be right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a hard one to let go of. Having an avoidant personality, yep. Overwhelm for sure. Yeah. Dense insulators and decoupling circuits. I love it. I love that imagery. Yeah, only thinking of ourselves. Yeah, thank you, Zoe. Really not being able to kind of see the relationship and seeing each other as individuals, or not being able to see the other as you know, we lose touch with someone else's humanity. Any other thoughts that people want to share in the chat? Those are all really great. I'm going to try to remember that dense insulators and decoupling circuits because that's a cool one. Love it. So here's a few of the ones that I've just listed, and a lot of these were named. You know, getting stuck in this right wrong thinking, whether we think we're right or whether we think we're wrong. Both of those positions can be a barrier to us being able to empathize with somebody else. We often worry that if we acknowledge and reflect back somebody's experience when we really don't like what they're doing or we really disagree with them, that somehow that's the same as agreeing with them. And, you know, it can be experienced like that by the other person, but it's not what's happening. Others mentioned this, we can be too triggered and we can't self-regulate enough. We can't, you know, soothe our nervous system enough to be able to be in the space of curiosity. We want to be heard and understood ourselves. And, you know, we're habituated culturally to look for ways of assigning blame and seeking punishment for something that's happened. Whether, again, we turn that on ourselves or we turn it outward to somebody else. Both of those will block our capacity to empathize. And we also worry that empathizing means that there's not going to be any accountability, that there's not going to be any change, that there's not going to be any learning. And that can be really scary if what's happened has been harmful or hurtful to us. Any questions before we move on? Comments? Anything you think is missing? Oops. And then what are some of the ways that we escalate conflict? You know, what are some of the ways that we respond that is really going to make it amp up? You know, interrupting somebody, dismissing or denying their concerns, not acknowledging their concerns or their experience or perspectives, expressing judgments of the other person. And I think that also goes again back onto ourselves. I think when we're feeling judged, we can get really reactive, and that will tend to escalate things. And one of the things that I'm really starting to recognize is the role of systemic issues, systemic patterns, systemic, you know, things in our culture that almost inevitably create these conflicts. And if we only focus on the interpersonal and we miss recognizing how the systemic is playing into this, it's feeding into it. It's in fact laying the groundwork for this to happen. If we miss that, it can, you know, reinforce or escalate conflict. I'm sure there's others. I'd love to hear from anyone that wants to add to this list. Again, raise your electronic hand, unmute yourself. Brendan.
What you mentioned, Catherine, about recognizing the role of the systemic. I might comment not having a common ground to reinforce those things, like even like to get someone in a conversation to try to recognize the role of the systemic, if there isn't that common ground of understanding of things like history and other stuff, it's going to be hard to establish those connections and bonds. So it's like, yeah, knowledge and of all sorts of stuff has to, that like things have to accumulate into a understanding, and yeah, not just zap. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, again, through my experience, even if the other person doesn't necessarily see the systemic or see it the same way that I do, me expanding my understanding of how that plays into things allows me to, you know, be more grounded when conflict arises, and I can go, aha, you know, and I might try to name it in the exchange, in the conflict. That can be helpful, but if the other person doesn't get it, at least I have that understanding that that's a piece of what's happening, and it can help me sort of settle, if that makes sense. Yeah, right. Any other thoughts or comments? Additions to this list? Always curious.
Andrea speaking.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about, like, maybe I'm getting a little semantics-y, but sometimes yeah, like unacknowledging, like letting things fester. I think sometimes I can get in like an empathy loop, but I don't actually take action to move it along. So I'm like, I get where I'm coming from, I get where you're coming from, and I can get stuck. So it's kind of anti-conflict, conflict as conflict avoidance, but I'm thinking about not doing. Mhm.
Yeah, especially if, like you say, you know, you get this to this place of understanding, but then somehow that understanding doesn't move into action. It doesn't move into things being different.
Or it all stays internal for me. It's like I don't actually ask. I'm afraid to ask, but I think I know where I'm coming from. I think like it's all like below surface.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
it's just kept internal, and yeah,
thought experiment, but not actual
sharing
meeting.
it.
I can make it kind of get messier because nothing's changing, and nothing's being confirmed in consensus reality.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why, you know, for me, a really big part of empathy is that reflection, is that question, like, is this what's going on for you? Because, you know, we can empathize, and we think we're empathizing, but we're not really sure. We may be way off. I've had that experience with my husband a couple of times where I'm like, oh my God, I was so far out in my field when I thought I was empathizing with you, and that's not at all what's going on. And I think especially if we act from that place where we think we know, that can definitely, you know, keep escalating things and creating more problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, naming that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So now I'm looking for somebody who has their conflict written down, who wants to do a little role play with me, just so we can demonstrate this. And then we're going to move into pairs where you'll get a chance to practice. And if you don't have a conflict, that's okay. We've got a scenario you can use in the breakout. But does anybody want to volunteer to role play with me? And you can share your conflict. You can act it out if you want to get into it, which would be ideal, because then we can model a non-empathic response, and then hopefully an empathic response that feels good. Colin, lovely. You wanna?
Hi, yes. I have a conflict and it's kind of uncomplicated,
Great.
but and it's recent and it's one that I really got stuck in. So, okay. So, what would you like me to do? Tell you the 3 sentences?
Yeah, and if there's like one sentence that one person or the other person said that was kind of like at the crux of it at the end, then we can play with that a little bit.
Okay. All right. Okay. I live in a shared place with a big yard, and I do a lot of gardening here. Both we have flower planted gardens and wild gardens. Have a roommate who doing some work around the house ended up pulling out a whole set of irises that were heirloom irises that were a gift to me and that I planted several years ago. And he threw them into the green bin. We had a house meeting at which point I brought that, well, I actually brought it up before the house meeting and then brought it up during the house meeting about the impact upon me and my disappointment, let's say, about that. And he clearly articulated his rationale for doing it, which was to not provide a hiding place for mice should they want to run behind the irises. Okay, that's my brief version.
Okay.
All right. So if you want to role play this, I'd be into doing that, but I'd like to take his part because I can tell you what he said.
Okay.
So
Sure.
do you need any more information about the basics here?
I think I can go with that. So shall we call this person Jim?
Let's call him Jim. That's perfect.
Okay. Jim, I'm like really so heartbroken and astonished that you would pull out all of these beautiful heirloom irises and put them in the green bin. Like, what were you thinking?
Well, they're a public health hazard because they provide a perfect runway for mice to hide behind.
You're worried about mice in our yard when there's rats and dogs and cats and now, all that going on back there. I mean, mice seem kind of innocuous to me.
Yes,
so that would be
but
my.
This is where they start. They run along the house. I've been in the business of safety for 25 years, and this is the first thing anyone who's in my industry knows is that you remove all the hiding places from around the house.
Right. So we're going to break out of the role play here for a sec.
Okay.
And just, highlight the ways in which we're escalating things here. I'm like, how can you be worried? I'm denying his concerns and his perspective. And then he's amping it up by bringing in, well, I had 25 years of safety, and sort of like, again, not acknowledging Colin's reality. So I'm curious if you can, Colin, if you can feel that energetically, that sort of like.
I totally do. Like just like I'm there again. And yeah, but that was the dynamic, right? We both are kind of feeling whatever our justification about, the moment. Yeah.
Right. So now we're going to kind of like rewind a little bit. And in this version, do you want to play you and I can offer an empathic response, or do you want to be Jim again?
No, if you could be Jim, that would help me see. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. So how about you share your distress with what happened, and I'm going to respond empathically.
Okay, but I'm Jim. Is that right?
I thought you were going to be you,
Oh,
but
okay.
you could do other one. Like if you're interested in like what would be an empathic response to him,
Yeah.
then you can be him. If you're
Yeah,
curious about what does it
I'd
feel
like
like,
to do that because I'm at a
okay,
loss and how to be empathetic.
sure.
I was
Okay.
totally verklempt. Okay, ready? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, this is a public health hazard. It provides a runway for mice to hide behind, and everyone knows that if they can hide behind that, that the next step is to jump in through the door, and there you go. And
Yeah.
I'm a
So I'm
professional. Yeah.
right. So I'm really imagining, or I'm wondering if you're feeling like quite concerned or even maybe anxious because you're really wanting your home to be, safe and secure and like a sanctuary where you don't have to worry about mice coming into the space and damaging things and potentially even spreading germs. Is that what's going on for you?
Well, 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 yeah. I mean, that's why I've worked 25 years in this industry of, you know, overseeing safety and cleanliness regulations in my place of work. Yeah, mice are really terrible.
Yes, I'm also hearing just like your real um, confidence and commitment to safety and cleanliness and your your expertise in that area and really wanting that to be acknowledged and recognized.
Well, yeah, and mice are just. I mean, that's just one thing here. Like, have you looked? You know, I don't know. Like, you know, in the crawl space. You know, do you know what that looks like? It's terrible. It looks like it hasn't been attended to for years. So, yeah. So you got to start somewhere.
Right. So you're really, feeling a lot of concern for the well-being of all of us in this house and really wanting to contribute to that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I kind of see that as that's kind of something I can add to the
Right.
house. Catherine, I'm gonna break
Yeah.
roll here.
Yeah.
You're good. Holy tamale. That was good. Yeah, it was very hard. I was feeling it very difficult to maintain that kind of posturing in the face of what you were saying to me.
Yeah. I'm glad. So you could get a sense of that sort of energetic shift.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was incredibly powerful. Like I was having to really kind of reach to kind of still be kind of like ignoring what you're saying.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much for playing with me, Colin.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was fun. Good. Okay. I'll let you know next time we're having a house meeting.
Please do.
Thank you.
So if anybody who witnessed that and found that meaningful, please, you could put a little thing in the chat and we can read that out for Colin. So he, it can be vulnerable and sometimes to be up in front of the classroom, so to speak. And I'm curious.
Catherine, I just want to add
Yeah.
in, just for everyone else to know. Hey, you guys, I'm blind, and so I'm not able to read the chat easily. That's why I'm dialed in on the phone. So it is really helpful, Catherine, when you read out the chat out loud.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if anybody also kind of got a sense of that energetic shift, or or any appreciation you want to put in the chat for Colin stepping up and offering his example to us, that would be very welcome. We got to thank you for sharing, Colin. From Tara. Good for you. I would think that you practiced Jim's view in both cases. Yeah, that was a smart move, Colin, to take his perspective and get that felt sense of his reality. Andrea says, thanks for sharing, Colin. It was cool to witness how the energy shifted. Yeah, and you keep those coming if you want to. So so some of you may have a scenario that you want to work with. And if you don't, here's one that you could consider. Carly, are you able to put, I'll read this out. But Carly, are you able to put this in the chat too? Thank you. So the scenario is you've just finished facilitating a group meeting. One of the participants comes up to you and says, why did you keep cutting me off? Don't you know how to properly facilitate a meeting? So that's something we can work with, or you're invited to work with the one that you have. And so we'll go to the instructions. So we'll kind of do what Colin and I just did. And one person will be the speaker. It's really helpful if you've got like one or two lines that kind of like launch you into that conflict. And at first, so there'll be the person speaking, and then there'll be the responder. And so the person speaking, which I'm calling the receiver, that's a bit confusing. Sorry about the language here. So the person speaking, at first, the responder will come forward with a non-empathic response and just kind of like escalating. And just once you've done that back and forth a couple of times, just, feel what that feels like in your body. Notice where it sits. Notice how it shows up for both the person doing it, the responding, and the person receiving that response. And then go back and do the same scenario again and making these empathy guesses and, using this formula if it's helpful for you. And Carly, do you mind dropping the feelings and needs list links in the chat? Hopefully you've all got them in your emails, but if not, Carly will make them available. I really encourage you to use the feelings and needs lists because we can sometimes, especially for feelings, sometimes what we do is we substitute an interpretation in. So for example, instead of saying I'm feeling hurt, we might say I'm feeling misunderstood. That's actually an interpretation of what somebody else is doing to us. Or I'm feeling angry, and you might say I'm feeling cut off. So I encourage you to use the feelings list, because when we substitute in interpretations instead of feelings, that can actually amp up the conflict. That can actually feed it a bit. And then also the same for needs. In that case, we sometimes confuse what we call strategies. So for example, in the example that Colin just gave, instead of saying I have a need for a clean house, like that might be what Jim was thinking, you would say, I have a need for safety, or I have a need for well-being. Is that clear? Does anybody want a little bit more information on that before we move into these pairs where we're going to do this practice?
Andrea speaking.
Yeah.
I am curious for a little more information, but it's partially because my internet just got a little bit
glitched a
bad.
bit.
So just if I could hear again one more example of a difference between an interpretation and a feeling.
Sure.
Might have been a little technical.
Yeah, no problem. So a common one is I'm feeling judged versus I'm feeling vulnerable, or I'm feeling concerned or anxious. Judged is like somebody has to be doing the judging, right? So it's an interpretation of what somebody's doing. Is that helpful?
Okay. Yeah, that's a clear example, and I heard clearly. Thank you so much.
Great. Awesome. And if you if you're really not feeling like you want to work in a pair and do this, although I really recommend that you do, put a 1 in front of your name, rename yourself. We'll give people a moment to do that, and then we'll just put you in a room where you can work through this on your own. But I do find it's much more impactful to have that experience with another person so that we can get that sense energetically of the difference. And Carly, are you able to put folks in breakout rooms? So I just saw Marilyn come back in. Marilyn, did you, can you put in the chat if you heard the instructions for the breakout groups or not, or just unmute?
I see it on the screen. I didn't hear it though.
Okay, were you gone
Is there
for a
anything
while?
else? No, I was literally gone for 2 seconds. I just, for some reason, I got booted out.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just if you're struggling with it, perhaps the person that you're paired with can provide some clarity. And you can always call me into your breakout room if there's some confusion or whatever. So feel free to do that as well. So Carly, have you been able to put people in pairs?
You have 2 pairs and a group of 3.
Oh, great. Okay. And
how much time for this breakout room?
let's do about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So I'll message when we're like 5 minutes through. So if you haven't switched at that point, switch. Or your group of 3 might have to manage it a little bit more. Okay, opening the room.
Great. Welcome back.
We're being recorded.
We're being recorded now. Yeah.
We had fun.
Good. Yay.
We were talking about how a lot of times you get into so much conflict that the group breaks apart. And it seems to break apart most of the time for me. Yeah. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Welcome back, everyone. So I'd love to hear your experiences. We've got sort of a few moments here to hear from people. If you want to share how that was for you, what you noticed.
In the group in my group with Renee, we role played a conflict I'm experiencing, that I'm like experiencing with my partner, but my partner's having a bigger conflict, and I role played my partner's side, and Renee role played my side, which was very helpful. It was similar to Colin's experience before, actually. First I was responded with the non-empathetic, then the empathetic, and it was a similar changed around the way the responses came out based on what went in. It came out different. Yeah. So yeah.
Cool. Cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. And that is a really powerful practice, to take the other person's perspective and to role play that, because you do get, it's interesting how we can get a felt sense of their experience, and yeah, it's a wonderful practice. Glad you two did that. Anyone else want to share what their experience was like? Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah, we played out my real world scenario, which was really helpful. I had Mary Lynn do the non-empathetic response, and Colin do the empathetic response. And yeah, I really got a good idea of how it felt. I think what I would want more help with is how do you carry on that empathy through a longer conversation where you don't necessarily agree with the partner with the person's point of view, because that was the real conflict in my situation. Was
I wanted to provide empathy where I really didn't agree with them, and they saw through it, and so it didn't go well.
Yeah, you know, it is that's actually when we can get into trouble if we're not actually really able to connect with that sense of empathy for the person, and we try to fake it. People can sniff it out, and you know, it's what it's important to try, and I think, you know, when you talk about this longer thing, part of our goal in empathizing with somebody, or at least part of what can be the outcome, is that they get to the point where they feel heard and understood and settle. And then you ask, are you willing to hear my experience? Are you willing to hear my perspective on this? Once they've settled, then that can create an opportunity for you to be able to say, hey, you know, for me, it's about this. Just wanted to offer you, when you were talking about that longer conversation and how that could go.
But yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. That's
yeah.
helpful.
And you know, going back to Brendan or anyone, you know, we may not be able to do this in the moment. If we are in relationship with the person that we're in conflict with, we can go take time, take space. It's always good when you're like, feel like all I can do right now is hold on. Okay, let's just like pause here, and, you know, ask for a pause, take a pause, and then go and process with somebody else, call somebody up and say, hey, can you empathize with me here? Or can you help me figure out how to empathize with this person? That's why community is so beautiful, is that we can call on each other for resources. When we have a community where we all have a particular practice and sort of an agreement about how we're going to handle things, if two people in that community are stuck, they can go to others in the community and get support, and then bring it back to that relationship. So that's one of the beauties of community. Do we have time for like one more? If one more person wants to share something, feel free to put stuff in the chat if you want to do that. And then we're just going to move into our closing. Any last word? Somebody who we haven't heard from today? Maybe Tara or Marilyn. Renee?
Yeah, I find it difficult when both people are so desperately needing empathy. Like, who goes first? Like, it seems like someone has to take one for the team, you know? And so how do you negotiate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, if you've got this practice as part of, you know, your understanding with this person or within a community, that can be a conversation. It's like, I'm a 10 out of 10 here. And I know I can't hear you unless I get at least a little sense of understanding and empathy from you. You can negotiate that openly, or you can say, hey, you know, again, do that timeout, go to somebody else, get some empathy and grounding from them. You know, check in with the other person. Where are you at? Is this a 10 out of 10 for you? Is it more like a 7 or 6 out of 10? Can you offer me a little something so that I can settle before we carry on? Is that helpful? Great. Okay, Carly, move us into our closing. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and your engagement. It's been delightful. You're muted, Carly.
There we go. The rookie thing. Okay, I'm talking. Okay. So thanks everybody. I hope that as we move into our kind of closing here, that you've been able to get some good information, maybe some good ideas. And this is only the first of the series in these workshops. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for some of the other ones. So as you can see here, I'm just sharing some information about the gift economy. So this is some information about the current targets. So the annual necessary trouble collective needs 37,800. Our fundraising target for this series is 6,410. So to date, $203.41. Wait, that's updated, I assume 2020. Oh, 23. Sorry, I get confused as to which one is the year in the name. Okay, so to donate, you can e-transfer to the Necessary Trouble Collective. So here's the email address right here, info@necessarytroublecollective.org. And we encourage people to give what they can, right? Anything that you're able to give enables Catherine and Leonie to do their work to continue offering these sessions, so that people can access it at whatever level they're able to. So take a look at your whatever your personal needs and whatever you feel like these sessions are worth, and people give at different amounts. Maybe what you can give today is $5. Maybe you can give $50. So depending on where you're at. I feel like I'm missing my slides. They're not advancing. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I think I missed the first one. So the 8 principles of the gift economy are intention, equity, abundance, access, transparency, generosity, interdependence, and faith. So all of this means that this is a community, right? People are building this community and bringing what they can to it, and allowing other people to access it as well. There is also a link to donate through Sutra if you prefer that one. So I'm just dropping, here's the email address in the chat, and as well as some information. So if anybody didn't get a chance to take a look at Sutra before, the rest of the sessions are also posted on the Fall Community Care and Repair series on Sutra. So there's a link on there. If you follow on the website, there's also opportunities to donate on there. And the Necessary Trouble Collective is taking applications for the in-person 6-day retreat on Bowen Island called Movements of Belonging. So all of that information is available on the Sutra website. And I think finally is the feedback form. So also
Yeah, we really rely on your feedback to grow in our capacity as facilitators and educators and community members, and it means so much to us to get that information from you. It's both nourishing and also helps us grow and learn and understand the needs of our community better. So we so appreciate if you are willing to spend a couple of minutes now before you move on to your next thing, just filling out that feedback form. We will also send it out in an email that you'll get tomorrow, kind of a follow-up email from today with, again, some links to different resources. And yeah, it was really amazing to have you all here today.
And maybe before you leave, I invite folks to either in the chat or unmute maybe one appreciation you have or a need that has been met on this call. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Hi, this is Colin speaking. I just wanted to say thank you so much. This was so nice, nicely organized and helpful and smooth, and the time just flew by. Oh my goodness. So thank you. And it just really helps highlight too how it, like for me personally, like kind of how it's easy to think that I'm empathetic, but then when it really comes down to it, like how challenging it is. And I think it's a really worthy challenge. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Sharing that, Colin. Yeah. grateful that you're here. Mhm.
And seeing in the
Yes.
chat, thank you for the resources. We'll definitely be referring to the slide deck. And also validation that I'm not alone in the struggle to navigate conflict in an empathetic way. Yes, everybody struggles.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why we need
Drew says,
community.
I appreciated how we co-created such a thoughtful space for reflection and questioning. Well, thank you so much, everybody,
Yeah.
for joining us today.
Hopefully you'll join us in our future ones. It was great to see you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, feel
everybody.
free to unmute and say goodbye.
Thank
So we
you.
can hear your
Good day,
voices.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank
thank you.
All you do.
Bye.
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 Bye.